Freedom has many difficulties, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in. Freedom is indivisible.
G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to look over, talk about and react to the US Army's new psychological warfare advertisement and recruiting tool called Ghosts in the Machine. And this is actually the second installment. We had one released a while back as well. Now what we need to remember is that this is a recruiting tool, but we'll break all this down as there's PSYOPs everywhere, and the best PSYOPs, well, you'll never know that you're actually being influenced by it. Now, PSYOPs, psychological operations, these are as old as war is. And of course, it is intrinsically tied to propaganda. And we'll go over effective propaganda and how that works in a little while once we watch through the video. Now, PSYOPs is defined as tactics intended to manipulate one's opponents or enemies, such as the dissemination of propaganda or the use of psychological warfare. And in my opinion, and many others, especially those that follow all of this closely, we're about to see a huge wave of this, and it's going to be indistinguishable from what is real and what is fake. Of course, with the rise of artificial intelligence and the ability to connect with people through the internet, as well as to persuade people and manipulate. And we're currently seeing a war involving major powers, whether by proxy or not, regardless, major powers are involved. And of course, this comes with clashing ideologies, and the largest amount of this since the fall of the Soviet Union and, of course, the end of the Cold War. And once again, we are on the forefront and likely unknowingly already receiving many PSYOPs, whether directly or indirectly, about many, many different things. Now, a little bit of reading about this if you'd like to from a reading list. So the Russian anxiety, this is really good, talking about the Russia in history versus from a historical point of view versus what is actually happening, and some bits in there how our opinions can be shifted on that. This book about propaganda. Now, again, this one's not really about war. It's more about how propaganda works in free markets and in business. This one's fantastic. A love letter to America. This guy was in Russian intelligence, talking about the rise and dissemination of different ideologies and how to pull people apart in America. This guy has a very famous speech. It's on YouTube. I'll link that as well. Of course, we have The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Of course, you can't go past that. And as well, The Sword and the Shield, of course, about the KGB. Many operations there as well. So a little bit of background on that. But of course, let's watch this. And what I will say is, of course, this is targeted at young people. It has a Call of Duty sort of feeling. And remember, this is a recruitment tool. They're the ones they will be looking to recruit into this. Now, before we start it, just to feed my infantryman's ego, if you don't know, I served in the military for a number of years in the infantry. Technically, the acronym for this is 4th Army POG, the Psychological Operations Group. If you don't know what a POG is, maybe you can Google it. But let's get stuck into this, and we will stop and start a little bit. I do apologise. I am a little man, and this is a little town. There must be a spark in little men that can burst into flame. This is from John Steinbeck. Now, this is actually from a novel called The Moon is Down, and this was written in 1942 and described by critics as an Allied effort during World War II, as a propaganda, as pure as freshly fallen snow, as righteous and moral as love for humanity. It is propaganda in affirmation of freedom, self-determination, and the indomitable will of people to perceive and overcome. And if you've read World Order by Henry Kissinger, we'll talk about that is what the US is trying to put out of liberties, self-determination, and freedom, but outwardly of the US as well. Continue.
There are many people in the world who really don't understand.
So what we hear here, the audacity to use a John F. Kennedy speech. Now, of course, this speech was in 1963 in West Berlin, and we'll look over this as we go. There are many people in this world who really don't understand, or say they don't, what is the great issue between the free world and the communist world. I'll leave this over here as we then go through this video.
Freedom has many difficulties, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in. Freedom is indivisible. And when one man is enslaved, all are not free.
Modern war has become a struggle for men's minds as well as for their bodies.
So you can see talking about men, talking about freedom, talking about those qualities that the US want in their world order, pushing outwardly, as well as using leaders. And then we'll speak a little bit more on this, but you can tell what I'm meaning about this Call of Duty type ad. And this is something major right here. I'll give you one guess at what that is. That is a Chinese money note. So very clear that for the 20th century, of course, the major ideological, the enemy, the Cold War was, or at least in the second half, was the Soviet Union as the main threat. Of course, since the collapse of that economically and the Union itself, but the rise of China especially.
Today we face an enemy who spends enormous sums of money and manpower all over the globe in an attempt to subvert the thinking of the people of the free world.
One thing I will say about these, for friends of mine that work in areas around intelligence, that China is fantastic at doing this over very, very long times, and further times than a lot of Westerners in democracies see, as we have these 4-year or 6-year cycles of leaders, other than areas where you'll have a leader for a very, very long time.
Confuse, divide, and ultimately to subjugate.
It is a contest unlike any we have ever faced in our history as a nation.
Contest for the minds and hearts of people around the world, all people.
When power corrupts, poetry cleanses.
So again, that is JFK speaking in 1963, dedicating a library to Robert Frost, of course, a poet who had a very, very difficult life, saying, when power corrupts, poetry cleanses. It continues.
We must never forget that art is not a form of propaganda. It is a form of truth.
That's important. Art is not a form of propaganda. It's a form of truth. And this is how propaganda works. So every time I speak about propaganda, this is what I go back to. And I sent this off a friend of mine, incredibly interesting person, but I won't say. But good propaganda need not to lie. In fact, must not lie. Propaganda which makes good use of the lie. But a right idea must be set forth in the appropriate way. So you're not lying, but you're putting what you want forward in the correct way, not to lie about it, but that manipulation forward. In other words, the secret of propaganda is to tell the truth in the appropriate form and presenting that truth in a different form. Behind every idea.
Psychologists find that control of emotions can be gained by understanding the stimulus-response pattern.
Bloody horse head on. It's spooky, isn't it? Is it not a bit spooky? It works as a recruiting tool. If I was 18, I'd be like, I'm doing this shit.
By a process called conditioning.
Let's go back here. This watch here, this is actually, I'm a bit of a watch guy, a C63 Sealander automatic by Christopher Ward, but a one-off PSYOPS boutique one as well. I don't think you can buy this one specifically, but there's a really good Instagram page called PsyWar Watches or something along those.
It's a strange, shadowy world. The doctored photograph, the misquotation, insinuation, and the lie.
I think of fire in connection with emotion.
So the invisible hands behind every emotion. So again, that manipulation, pushing around of that truthful information, information presented in the truthful form, and the pushing of psychological operations on people. And many people will say, if you read back to this book, A Love Letter to America, that we're still having effects from what the Russia or the Soviet intelligence services were trying to do in America still to this day. I go and watch, I'll link it down below.
Cause, effect,
The old school animation of the ghost is awesome. So of course, surrendering soldiers from many different times throughout history. Part of the special operations community.
We'll light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
Yes, in modern warfare, our military leaders are finding that words and ideas are highly effective weapons.
So we believe cyber. So that goes back to that propaganda thing about presenting information. Words and ideas are highly effective weapons. And going back to the Soviet Union, and because of course the Soviet Union collapsed and we had so much come out from defectors from the KGB, we know more about those psychological operations than others running. But many scholars will say the main threat of the Soviet Union against America was ideology more so than actually militarily and economic. But you can do with that as you will. Now, legends, I'm not much of a reactor, so I tried to put these together, and I guarantee people will notice 1,000 more little bits and pieces in this, little Easter eggs in that video that I have missed. But I thought it would be fun to go through with you, as I think it relates to a lot of what we do and what we see in our everyday reporting. Have a great day. I'll speak to you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.